At 2:20 in the afternoon on April 7, 1945, the largest battleship ever built exploded. A column of fire shot 6,000 feet into the sky. American pilots more than 100 miles away watched a mushroom cloud rise over the East China Sea. The shockwave rattled aircraft still circling the wreckage. The Yamato was gone, and 3,055 sailors went down with her. But what those men did not know, what their families would never be told, was that this was not a battle. It was a sacrifice, ordered by admirals who knew from the start that no one was coming home. To understand how this happened, we need to go back 9 days. But first, you need to understand what the Yamato actually was. The Yamato was supposed to be unsinkable. Built in total secrecy before Pearl Harbor, she was the most powerful warship ever constructed. 68,000 tons of steel, 9 18-inch guns, the largest ever mounted on a ship, capable of hurling shells weighing over 3,000 pounds, more than 25 miles. Armor plating over 25 inches thick in some places. She was designed to single-handedly outgun anything the American Navy could throw at her. But for 3 years, Japanese commanders had held her back. Too valuable to risk, too important to lose. Japanese sailors joked about her. They called her the Hotel Yamato because she spent more time anchored safely in port than she ever spent fighting. By April 1945, that joke was not funny anymore. Japan was losing the war. American forces had just landed on Okinawa, only 500 miles from the Japanese mainland. The army was preparing thousands of kamikaze aircraft for suicide attacks, and someone decided the Hotel Yamato needed to check out. But here is where the conspiracy begins. On March 29, 1945, Emperor Hirohito sat in a briefing room in Tokyo while his military leaders explained their plan to defend Okinawa. The army had a plan. Thousands of kamikaze aircraft would crash into American ships. The emperor listened, and then he asked a single question. What is the Navy doing? 7 words. That was all. But the men in that room heard something else. They heard criticism. They heard the emperor implying that the Navy was sitting idle while the army sacrificed everything, and that accusation could not stand. Within hours, Admiral Suemu Toyota, commander-in-chief of the combined fleet, made a decision. He would send the Yamato on a suicide mission to Okinawa, not because it could succeed, not because there was any tactical value, but because the Navy needed to prove it was willing to die too. The plan was called Operation 10 Go. The official translation was Operation Heaven 1, but everyone involved knew what it really meant. In Japanese military terminology, this was designated a Surface Special Attack Force, and special attack meant only one thing: suicide. Here was the mission. Yamato would sail with a light cruiser called Yahagi and 8 destroyers. They would have almost no air cover because every available plane was reserved for kamikaze attacks. They would sail directly toward the most heavily defended naval position on Earth, in broad daylight, without any realistic chance of survival. If by some miracle they reached Okinawa, they were ordered to beach the Yamato on the shore and use her as a stationary gun platform until she was destroyed. Then, the surviving crew, nearly 3,000 sailors, would go ashore and fight as infantry until they were all dead. The orders specified they would receive only enough fuel for a one-way trip. But what happened next reveals just how many people knew this mission was murder. The orders were finalized in Tokyo, but the ship captains who would actually have to carry them out were not told. For days, the men who would die knew nothing about their fate. On April 5th, 2 days before departure, Vice Admiral Ryunosuke Kusaka flew from Tokyo to the fleet anchorage at Tokuyama. He was not there to discuss strategy. He was there to make sure the mission happened, no matter what objections were raised. Because Vice Admiral Seiichi Ito, The man chosen to command the Surface Special Attack Force from aboard the Yamato had refused. Ito called the mission futile and wasteful. He had seen the numbers. Without air cover, sailing toward hundreds of American carrier aircraft was not a battle. It was an execution. But Kusaka delivered the message directly. This was what the Emperor wanted. This was an order from Combined Fleet. There would be no further discussion. Ito fell silent. He would comply. And with that, 3,000 death sentences were signed. That same afternoon, the ship captains were finally assembled aboard the cruiser Yahagi and told what they would be doing in 48 hours. The briefing did not go well. Every single captain objected. Captain Tamichi Hara of the Yahagi said what everyone was thinking. He said attacking the American fleet without air cover was like throwing an egg against a rock. The captains proposed alternatives. Independent raiding operations against American supply lines. Hit-and-run attacks. Anything with even the smallest chance of success. They were overruled. But here is the most damning detail of all. When the captains continued to object, they were given an option. Any captain who did not wish to participate could refuse the mission without penalty. None of them did. They knew the mission was suicide. They said so out loud. But when it came time to refuse, not one of them could bring himself to stay behind while his men sailed to their deaths. That night, the executive officer of the Yamato organized a party. Sake flowed freely. Officers and sailors drank heavily into the night. Some wrote death poems, others wrote final letters to their families, knowing those letters would arrive after they were already dead. Everyone understood. This was a farewell. And here is what makes this conspiracy complete. 6,000 miles away, in the headquarters of the United States Fifth Fleet, Admiral Raymond Spruance already knew everything. American codebreakers had intercepted and decoded the Japanese radio transmissions outlining Operation 10 Go. The United States Navy knew the details of the suicide mission before most of the Japanese officers who would carry it out. At 12:30 in the morning on April 6th, hours before the Yamato even left port, Spruance ordered his forces to prepare for the attack. The Americans were not just waiting, they were ready. But what happened when the Yamato actually departed would prove just how doomed this mission truly was from the very first moment. At 4 in the afternoon on April 6th, the Yamato steamed out of Tokuyama Harbor. The cruiser Yahagi led the formation with 8 destroyers arranged in a protective diamond around the massive battleship. Nearly 7,000 Japanese sailors were aboard those 10 ships. They were spotted almost immediately. 2 American submarines, the Threadfin and the Hackleback, were lurking at the exit of the Bungo Strait. They tracked the Japanese force for hours, radioing constant position updates to the American fleet. Here is a detail that proves the crew knew what was really happening. The submarines sent their messages uncoded. There was no attempt to hide the transmissions. The Japanese radio operators aboard the Yamato intercepted those American messages. They heard the enemy reporting their exact position, their heading, and their speed. The crew of the Yamato knew they were being hunted. They knew the Americans knew exactly where they were. They sailed on anyway, because those were the orders. By dawn on April 7th, the Japanese force was in the open ocean south of Kyushu, heading toward Okinawa. American reconnaissance aircraft found them within hours. 2 Martin PBM Mariner flying boats began circling the fleet, staying just outside anti-aircraft range, never losing sight of their target. The Yamato fired her massive 18-inch guns at the flying boats, using special anti-aircraft shells designed to burst into thousands of fragments. The shells exploded in the sky. The flying boats kept circling. There was nothing the Japanese could do. At 10:30 in the morning, Vice Admiral Mark Mitcher launched the attack from Task Force 58. 280 aircraft lifted off from American carriers, dive bombers, torpedo bombers, all of them heading straight for the Yamato. What followed was not a battle. It was a massacre. The first wave struck at 12:30 in the afternoon. American pilots described the scene as overwhelming. The Yamato threw up a wall of anti-aircraft fire unlike anything they had ever seen. Colored bursts of flak, purple, red, yellow, and green filled the sky in every direction. One pilot said it would have been beautiful if it was not so deadly. But there were simply too many American planes and not enough Japanese guns. Torpedoes, set to dive deep beneath the Yamato's thickest armor plating, slammed into her port side. Bombs crashed through her decks and exploded inside the ship. Within minutes, the Yamato began listing dangerously to one side. Captain Kosaku Ariga ordered the starboard engine and boiler rooms flooded to counterbalance the tilt. But the warning to the sailors trapped inside those compartments came too late. Several hundred men drowned at their posts, water rushing in faster than they could escape. The cruiser Yahagi took 7 torpedoes and 12 bombs. She stopped dead in the water and sank with most of her crew. The destroyer Hamikaze broke completely in half and disappeared beneath the waves. 3 more destroyers were so badly damaged they had to be abandoned and scuttled by their own crews. And still, the American attacks continued. By 2 in the afternoon, the Yamato was listing so severely her main guns could no longer elevate to fire. Steam from ruptured pipes scalded sailors alive where they stood. Fires burned out of control across multiple decks. Bodies and pieces of bodies covered every surface. At 2:20, fire reached the forward ammunition magazines. The explosion was visible from over 100 miles away. A pillar of fire erupted 6,000 feet into the sky. A mushroom cloud of smoke rose 4 miles above the ocean. American pilots still in the area said it looked like an atomic bomb had detonated. In an instant, the largest warship ever built became a tomb. The Yamato rolled over and sank in less than 3 minutes. Of the 3,332 men aboard, only 269 survived. Vice Admiral Ito went down with the ship. He had refused the mission. He had called it wasteful. And then he had obeyed orders and died carrying them out. Captain Ariga died on the bridge. Before the end, he ordered a sailor to tie him to the compass stand so that he could not be washed overboard. He chose to die, standing exactly where he had commanded the ship. In total, Operation Tengo killed more than 4,000 Japanese sailors across all 10 ships. The Americans lost 10 aircraft and 12 men. The largest battleship ever built, representing years of secret construction and hundreds of millions of dollars, accomplished nothing. She never reached Okinawa. She never fired her main guns at an American ship. She served no tactical purpose whatsoever. But the Japanese Navy could tell the Emperor they had done something. The men who planned this mission knew exactly what would happen. The men who objected were overruled. The Americans knew the details before the Japanese captains did. And 3,000 sailors died so that admirals in Tokyo could answer a question about what the Navy was doing. This was not a glorious last stand. This was a bureaucratic execution disguised as war. And for 80 years, the families of those sailors were told their sons died as heroes defending Japan. They were never told that the mission was designed to fail, that every captain objected, that the commander himself called it futile before he was ordered to comply. Now you know what really happened. If this story made you angry, you need to see what the American commanders did at Okinawa that they never wanted anyone to know about. That video is on screen now. Subscribe so you do not miss what comes next.